Hello, everyone. Welcome to the February 19th, 2026 RAN. We're happy to have you joining us today. We will be having quite a few updates, and yeah, with that, I'll get into it. First, I'd just like to give a special recognition to the RAC subcommittee, Communication Subcommittee. These are the folks that help put these events together, not only the virtual sessions that we have, but also making sure communications across the university are done well. So thank you, special thank you to all of these individuals. Um, to go over just some practical meeting agenda items. This event is being recorded and the presentation will be posted to the RAM website shortly after the meeting. We are in a webinar mode, so the chat is disabled. So if you have any comments or questions, please use the Q&A function. And while live captioning is turned on, you can turn it off on your own screen and Zoom in your own personal Zoom settings. Today's agenda will be the community kudos, as we saw kind of a little bit beforehand. We had quite a few folks that were getting special recognition from their colleagues. Presentations on the Okta multi-factor authentication tool that will be rolling out in the coming weeks, international shipping updates, and then we have sponsored programs, ORSP, research security, ITS, and RAC also giving updates. And then we'll end with a quick poll. The community kudos is a long list, as we saw in the intro. So I won't be going through each of these individual items or individual names, but please look for your name. And we also linked it in the chat so you can link to the specific thanks that your colleagues gave you. And we always like to give recognition to these individuals who were called out specifically. So thank you. And our MC today, I'd like to introduce Jess Harper. She is the manager of Research Administration Communications at ORSP. She brings a lot of depth with over 20 years of experience driving communications across this health, research, academic, and public sector organizations. She's most recently served at NIH as the communication directors for the National Institute on Aging Center. And with that, I will hand it off to Jess. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma, and thank you to the RAC Communications Committee for inviting me to MC today. I wanted to start a little bit with a little bit about me. Um, this is a picture of me with my son, Charlie, and Charlie is 7 years old. So, like a lot of kids his age, Charlie wants to be an astronaut. And when he doesn't want to be an astronaut, he wants to be an inventor. And when he doesn't want to be an inventor, he wants to be a superhero. So, me, when I was a kid, what I wanted to be when I grew up was an editor. And you might imagine that an editor is not a common pick on the playground, but I knew from an early age that I wanted to work with words. So I believe that no matter what we wanted to be when we grew up, each of us has a little bit of superhero in us. So I wanted to take this opportunity as the MC today to share a few superpowers with you that I've picked up along the way, and hopefully that you can use in your everyday work. So the first superpower I want to talk about is clear communication. And I want to share this quote that you may have heard before, but it is definitely worth repeating again. So the quote is the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that communication has taken place. So, how many times have you said something or written something and you were just sure that the other person understood what you had said? But then later you realize that they really didn't. They say or do something later that you think, well, they really didn't understand. And this miss in communication is really common. And There are a lot of aspects that go into making sure that message lands and is retained. But one of the pieces I wanted to talk about today is this aspect called clear communication. So, what is clear communication? It's basically sharing information in a way that's easily understood. So we can think of the three C's. Is it clear? Is the information easily understood without confusion? Is it concise? Does it convey what's needed in the fewest words possible? And is it consistent? Is the information presented in a uniform tone, style, and messaging? Now, for each of these superpowers, I also want to give you some tips to embrace these and a challenge that you can take away. So, for this superpower, some tips that you can try out are to pick short, simple words over longer ones when you're communicating. Avoid jargon, or if you do need to use it, explain the meaning. Now, I'll give a caveat with this one because jargon definitely does depend on your audience. If you're talking with a group of people who clearly understands what a PAF is, then you would want to use a PAF. Oftentimes, though, we're communicating with a faceted audience, and so we want to keep in mind other people that might be reading the message that might not have that context and background. A really great tip to use is just to use bullet points instead of long paragraphs, just to think about how you can structure your content in a way that's easily scannable and digestible. And then to practice reading your message out loud. I love this trick, even just writing emails, or you can practice a presentation you're doing. But when you hear yourself read something, say something out loud, you can sort of hear those places that you might trip or it might feel like it's getting too long. Adapting the tone and style. This connects back to the audience and thinking about what is the background that they have, where are they coming from, what do they need to know, or what do they not need to know. And then try to, if you're presenting, to speak at a steady, moderate pace. And the reminder I try to use for this is to imagine that I'm reading to a group of children. This is a tip that somebody gave me a few years ago that I really like in terms of thinking like, what is the right pace to speak at? You can also try to check for understanding. So when after you've communicated something, you can use some phrases like, I hear you saying, or what I think we've decided on. So you can have some sort of ways that summarize or mirror back what that other person has said to check for shared understanding. And then lastly, try to include a clear call to action or a takeaway in the message that you're communicating. So the challenge for this superpower is the next time you're drafting an email, I want you to try to ask yourself, if you read the message aloud, do you trip on anything? Could you use shorter words or sentences or bullets to make it easier to scan and read? Are there any acronyms or references that the person you're sending it to won't understand? And is your call to action clear? Is it clear what you want the person to do or take away from the message that you're sending? And with that, I will introduce our first speaker, our first presentation from Ryan Vies, who's going to talk about the Okta integration. So Ryan is a senior business analyst in ITS and the change management lead for the Wolverine Identity Program. He has been at UM since 2004 and worked on projects that touch the daily work of all three campuses, focusing on the impacts that these projects bring to individuals and campus as a whole. Ryan?
Thank you, Jess, and hi, everybody. Thank you very much for having me here today. I'm going to go over some of the basics of the Wolverine Identity Program and talk about the specifics for the launch of Okta coming up next week. We are 6 days away. So next slide, please. Oh, sorry, I did that already. So let's go to the next slide. So what is the Wolverine Identity Program? We are a 3-year program. We are in year 1, and we are here to modernize the identity services at the university as a whole. Part of that will involve changing the login experience, and we'll talk about that in detail here shortly. But right now, the reality of the identity management systems here is we have a lot of them, and they all talk to each other in various ways. We have chosen Okta to be a unified platform for all of those services. So going forward, you're going to see some outward-facing changes. The main one here is the replacement of Duo with the Okta Verify app for multi-factor authentication. You'll also see new login screens. So the familiar web login screens will be changing this coming Wednesday to be based on screens from Okta. This change affects everybody. So if you're on Flint or Dearborn or Ann Arbor, it doesn't matter what your affiliation is. This change applies to you, includes retirees, alumni, and sponsored accounts as well if you deal with those things. Everyone will be changing on the same day next week, Wednesday. And we want folks to get signed up in advance, and I'll talk a little bit more about that here as well. So next slide, please. Program goals overall, we really do want to provide a more effortless authentication experience for folks on campus. Introducing new methods for people to be able to sign in. We have passwordless options with Okta. We have the new app, obviously. Another big push of the program in years 2 and 3 is to have a unified identity management platform, and Okta does give us that opportunity. Today, a lot of places hold identity information, and they don't necessarily talk to each other, and we want to fix that and make sure that individuals can go to one place, update their identity information, and have that flow out to all systems on campus. We're going to talk a little bit more about we are talking about changing the guest experience here on campus. I know for a number of units, that's a difficult thing at the moment. And we want to make that as seamless as we can for folks who are coming to campus temporarily. We want to simplify onboarding. If you've ever done new hires and had to deal with getting services provisioned for new hires, we want to improve that process as well. If you're a service provider, if you're getting that contract for a new SaaS solution, for example, we want to make the integration to university single sign-on services as easy and as quick as possible. Okta provides a lot of out-of-the-box integrations, so those integrations should be stood up much, much quicker than folks are accustomed to. And finally, we're going to introduce some lifecycle management where it hasn't existed before. Notably, this will be for unique name accounts. We will have new lifecycle requirements for all accounts on campus, but the campus unique name account requirements are relatively new, and I'll talk a little bit about that as well. Next slide, please. So why are we changing? I mentioned the numerous systems that we have. Okta really does provide a unified place for us to do all of our identity management and much of the security work that we do here. It positions U of M for the cloud-first, mobile-first world that we live in. And it does give us a lot more options for monitoring the security posture of all university accounts. And in a common way, we can monitor all the accounts in various places today, but Okta lets us do that in one place and gives us a lot of both visibility and fine-grained control over what we do with that information. I mentioned some more sign-in options. We're really excited about things like passwordless sign-in. This takes advantage of the biometric options on your devices, like if you have a Mac, for example, you can use the Touch ID. If you're on Windows, Windows has a platform called Windows Hello that allows you to use both fingerprint readers and the camera on your laptop to authenticate without typing in a password. And then those transformative opportunities for identity management, we really do want to have a hard look at how we could start someone's identity and affiliation with the university in a single place and have that pushed down into other systems. That's a lot of work. And for anyone who's dealt with PeopleSoft or things of those nature, we have a lot of work ahead of us, but that is an important goal of the program. Next slide, please. Timeline. Since January 14, we have been in an open enrollment phase, so you can go to Okta verify.umich.edu right now and enroll. I highly, highly encourage you to do that before February 24th, because on February 25th, we're going to flip everything over to be Okta native. Signing up now is a much better experience. Get your mobile device set up. You can also get enrolled in some of those passwordless options. On desktop, it's called Okta Verify, and the technology is known as FastPass. But if you're a My Workspace customer, that app is already installed on your machine. But February 25th, if you don't get there, you'll be required to do so. And February 25th is the big day. So we'll have the new login screens. You'll use the Okta Verify app on your device to sign in instead of Duo. And you will be required to complete Okta enrollment at that point. One caveat, If you use systems that do not use web login, so typically these are remote servers that you're accessing via SSH or RDP protocols, those will continue to use Duo for a short time after the 25th. We are working directly with the folks that support those systems to affect their change to Okta, but there were some technical dependencies that we had to wait until after February 25th. So don't delete Duo when you register. Please keep that on your system. There's no cost to do that, and we will be communicating much more widely as we roll Duo off of university services as a whole. Next slide, please. So what specifically is changing on February 25th? Next slide. These are the new screens. On the left, you'll see the desktop environment if you were logging into Wolverine Access, for example, and on the right is the mobile experience. Effectively, what you're doing is you're entering your unique name and your password, and as soon as you do so, the icon here with a number is displayed. All you have to do is go to your device and tap the corresponding number on your device, and you're authenticated. That is the experience. No more typing in 3-digit codes into the Duo app. You can simply tap the number you see on the screen and you're done. Next, please. What else is changing? So aside from the login screens and the new MFA app, the URL that you see in your browser will change. Today it says weblogin.umich.edu. On February 25th, you should start looking for okta.umich.edu to be sure that you are going to the right place to sign in. With moments of change like this, lots of bad actors are out in the world trying to scam or trick you into going to the wrong place. So always take a look at your address bar in your browser, make sure you're on the right place. Those passwordless options become available to everyone. Unfortunately, not to our friends in Michigan Medicine. They have opted not to allow those on their machines, but if you're on campus, all of these options are available. And the new annual sign-in requirements will begin on the 25th. We're going to turn on that policy on the 25th, so the one-year clock starts running at that point. Next slide, please. Account lifecycle requirements. These are, for the most part, global. Again, for your unique name accounts, this is probably what most people care about. At 6 months of inactivity, we don't tell you about it, but in the background, we raise the risk level of your account. What you might see if you come back at 6 months plus a week is maybe an additional step to log in that first time, a second MFA prompt, something of that nature. You don't have to contact the service desk or anything like that. It just might be a tiny bit more friction to get logged in to make sure you are who you say you are when you're logging in. At 9 and 13 months, we're going to start emailing you and we're going to say, hey, we haven't seen you in a long time. You really do need to sign in. That same additional friction will apply there, but you don't have to contact anybody. You can sign into your account and reset the clock. At 14 months, however, we are suspending your account. So you are not able to sign in at that point. You do have to contact the service center to recover your account. That contact with the service center will likely involve some sort of ID verification, but then they can unlock your account. Importantly, at the 14-month mark, if you get your account back at that point, all of the services that you had been given are still intact. So your Gmail account, any Canvas courses you may have been given access to, any system or a role that you might have in PeopleSoft, for example, all of those things will remain intact at 14 months. You just have to do your account recovery and get that stuff back. At 19 months, however, that is no longer the case. Your account is not suspended, it is deactivated. And the act of deactivating your account deprovisions a number of services that are given to that account. You can contact the service center at that point to recover your account, but you will have to also contact individual services to get access again to those systems. We really need to do this because we have a lot of alumni out there. We have a lot of retirees who are just not using their accounts. And unfortunately, those accounts are huge targets for bad actors to try and get access to university services. So if you haven't, and I know a number of you have already just because of the numbers we see on our tracking system, but if you have not enrolled, please, please, please go to oktaverify.umich.edu, enroll your UMich account. If you go to that URL, we have a number of links to both download the new applications and generate QR codes to get you signed up very quickly. At most, this takes you 5 minutes. Uh, the slides will be available after the fact. That link for step-by-step instructions, if you want to see what's going to happen. We have screenshots. We have, numerical steps to walk you through it. Please share that widely. If you know somebody in your office who's just been putting it off and has been ignoring the NAG screens, now is the time to sign up. And that's it. So if you have any questions, we have a website and we are posting frequent updates to that for all the communications that we're sending out. We also have a group email address there. And I'm happy to take any question. I do see some stuff in Q&A here. How employees log into the VM? Excuse me, I will read these things out, not to myself. How will med school employees log into the VPN? Currently, we type a password. I will apologize. I do not know the specifics about med school VPN. There is a med school specific group working on the transition for that. I will provide that to the folks who organize this meeting. Hopefully that can go out with the notes after the fact. But there is a group dedicated to supporting Michigan Medicine employees for the transition. There are a few Okta apps. Which app is correct? Yes, there are a number of Okta apps in your app store. I would go to oktaverify.umich.edu. We have QR codes that will direct you to the specific app you need for your platform. So if you're on an iPhone or an Android, we have 2 individual links. But the app itself is called Okta Verify if you're just searching. In my experience, unfortunately, it tends to be like the 2nd or 3rd ranked search result in the App Store. But yeah, you can always go to our website. We have links to the official apps there. You're surprised. See, the new sign-in method doesn't have us entering a number. Backwards. Yeah, I mean, every company that does multi-factor authentication has a different approach to it. Entering 6-digit codes has been around for a long time. I don't think any of these things are any more insecure than the others. It is, in my opinion at least, significantly more convenient to just tap a number instead of having to retrieve the code and type it in. I was not a personal huge fan of the type in a 3-digit code to Duo, so maybe I'm not the right audience for that. But yeah, if you want something that's the most secure option and the quickest, definitely check out FastPass on the desktop. Being able to use a biometric it's amazing. I was not convinced when we started this, and I am a huge fan. I am really excited for when we change next Wednesday because I don't have to type in stuff anymore. You literally go to the website. It pops up on your screen for my Mac. It pops up and says, "Hey, touch your Touch ID." I put my finger on the Touch ID and I'm signed in. I never entered my username. I never entered my password. It just signs me in. It's a really great experience, and that is very secure because that's using certificate pairings, so it's cryptographically secure to do as well. Yes, the lifecycle requirement applies to all university accounts, alumni, sponsored affiliates, friend accounts. Yes, it is a global policy for accounts. Since Friends was last on your list, I'll just throw a stat out here to kind of highlight why we think it's so important. We, for the transition, have staged approximately 110,000 relatively active friend accounts in Okta so that those folks, when they come back, will just have an account ready to go. In our current friend database, we have over 1.2 million friend accounts. So from 1.2 million to 110 is a significant number of accounts that are just effectively abandoned and available for attack. So we really need to have life cycle on these accounts to keep universities' resources secure as we can. That was everything in the Q&A. I don't know if there's anything in chat or other channels that I'm not aware of, but I'm happy to take that.
I did just have a quick question, Ryan. I know I've already enrolled in Okta Verify, and I still sometimes get the Duo prompts right now, but am I correct in assuming that will all switch over next week?
Yes, and if you do the enrollment today, you will continue to use Duo until next week. So please don't delete Duo. I would also advise that coming up next week, you don't have to delete Duo, on the 25th either. We know I've done this myself, but we know that lots of people on campus have used Duo to secure personal accounts. So deleting the app will actually break that if you've used it to secure your PayPal account or your eBay account or something like that. Keep the Duo app on there. There's no reason to delete it, either financially or any other reason. But until all of those things are vacant from your Duo app, I would keep it. But yes, everything will switch over on Wednesday, and you'll start seeing prompts from Okta
Fantastic. Thanks.
You're welcome. If there's no other questions, I think, Jess, I am turning it back to you.
Thank you, Ryan. I also want to say before you go how much I adore the squirrel and the
Oh, thank
puffy
you.
jacket. And I recently learned this morning, tell me if this is correct, that its name is Octavia.
It is, yes. This is Octavia. She is our mascot. You'll be seeing a lot of her throughout the program. All mad props to my marketing and communications person, Julie McDonald. She was instrumental in getting Octavia into the world. We've been doing a lot of tabling events. We were at Ross yesterday, for example, and the students keep asking us when we're going to get Octavia to be the mascot instead of the Wolverine. But I don't think we've quite got that level of influence yet. But
Well, it's great.
thank you. I will tell the folks on marketing that we're very happy with Octavia.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, thank you, Ryan. Okay, so I will, before our next presentation, I'll take this opportunity to share another superpower with you all. So for this one, I want to talk about storytelling. And it might seem like a stretch to determine how we'll apply this into our everyday work, but as I said, I'll give you some tips and a challenge. So, storytelling is essentially telling a story that conveys emotion and drives action. You'll likely remember this from school, or maybe you still write stories now. They have a beginning, a middle, and an end, but not always. They can happen in different, they can be told out of the order that they happen in. But good stories always have compelling characters, an immersive setting, and a conflict and resolution. And that last part, the conflict and resolution, will be really important in terms of something that we can employ in our everyday work. So, a few tips to think about how we can use storytelling. Uh, Thank you. That first, we can share the why behind the what of what we're doing. So this basically, instead of just stating what the thing is, this is the what matters for that person, what's in it for them. So really thinking about the purpose behind whatever the action is, that can really help with fostering engagement and understanding. And this problem solution framework is a really helpful way to set this up, similar to the conflict resolution in a story. If we can basically talk about, what is the pain point that we're solving, or what are we trying to address, what's improved because of the action that we did, this can be really helpful in driving that emotion and connection. You can also think about incorporating memorable details, but of course, you'll want to balance this one with the previous superpower of clear communication. So, too many details can muddy things up, but a few key details can make things really stick. And time in this case is one that I often think of that's really important. For example, if you're saying, over the past 3 months, this is what we achieved. Again, the people who are involved, the characters, can be really important pieces to include too. And then this is pairing data with insights is similar to sharing the why behind the what. So rather than just stating the number, talking about it in terms of what's the context and the meaning. So this might look like giving a comparison to, if you're giving a number, then you might say that this is X% different than it was last year. Or if you're drawing conclusions, if you're trying to have some insights and takeaways and drawing conclusions from the data, what can you do with this information? And then the last tip is to think about how you can incorporate images and videos in your messages. And I don't imagine that we all have time to create individual videos for everything we're creating, but there are a lot of resources out there that already exist that you could tap into. And some of these are even built into the systems we already use, where you can access stock images or videos. There's also a site called Michigan Commons that has resources, creative resources that all of us can use. And I think I can drop that in the Q&A to share with everybody, or find out with Chris how to share that. And then your challenge for the superpower is the next time that you're reporting out on a project to ask yourself these questions. Think about the purpose, the why behind the what. Is the purpose clear? And then over the course of your message, is there a clear problem and solution? Are there details that you could add that would make this memorable and engaging? Did you include context that explains your data? And is there an image that you could create, or a visual that would help create the connection? Thank you, Chris. There's that Michigan Commons link. And with that, I will introduce our next speakers, Bennett Gillum and Jillian Miranda, who will be talking about international shipping updates. So Bennett Gillum is an intermediate procurement agent within the research commodity team within procurement services at the university. Over the past year, his primary responsibilities have included supporting international transactions, specifically providing expertise in import processes and duty mitigation strategies. Jillian Miranda is a senior procurement agent with the General Goods and Services commodity team within procurement services. Her 5 years with Michigan Procurement, in her 5 years with Michigan Procurement, she has also been part of the technology commodity team. That as part of her current role, she manages our shipping and logistics contracts and relationships, both domestic and international. I'll turn it over to Jillian and Bennett.
Great, thanks, Jess. Thanks everyone for having us today. We can go to the next slide for the agenda. Thank you. So today, Bennett and I will be going through some quick introductions of procurement and our shipping partners. We'll review some best practices for international shipping, as well as highlight some key processes and resources that can make shipping go much smoother for all of you. And a quick note that I believe the slide deck will be shared afterwards, and so any links or contact information you'll have after, and we'll try to answer your questions in the Q&A as we go or afterwards. All right. We also have Greg Gabbard here with us, who's the manager of the procurement research team. He'll be helping us answer questions as well. And we also have a lot of other procurement colleagues that are always willing to help as well, but you can contact us directly anytime. Our information will be given out later. We would like to note in this link the key issues affecting procurement services webpage. This is a recently, within the last year, published webpage that procurement's put out, which will be a consolidation of a lot of the shipping and logistics information that we currently have out there. This is just a snapshot of the website. It will include things like tariffs, tariff updates as things change, things to consider when you're shipping internationally, some information about our logistics partners, and frequently asked questions that come up among some other resources that we can provide. And then if you go to the next slide, you'll also see down in the right-hand corner, that little blue box is Procurement's AI chatbot, Nick. And so this is a relatively new offering to campus that it works like pretty much any other chatbot you've probably used, where it can help answer your questions or navigate you to the right places to get your questions answered. Or it can even help you create a ticket that will go directly to procurement if you're not finding what you need. So I really recommend you guys check this out and see if, just play around with it a bit, see if it can answer your questions, or we're always happy to help you. So this would be a good page to bookmark in the future, or for the future, because we include updates on it as things change as well. All right, we also wanted to highlight one of our new partners, Baker Logistics. They're our new customs broker. They've been really wonderful to work with so far, and provide a lot of expertise for things like customs clearance, duty exemption applications, and they will pretty much consult on all things international shipping. They also have a web page that you can get to from our procurement website. It looks like this. Um, this is where you can access their contact information if you want to reach out to them. There's also instructions on how to start an import shipment. They're always available to answer any questions you might have. So we would really encourage you to reach out and introduce yourselves and ask any questions you might have if you think you'll ever need to use them in the future. They do charge a fee for some of their services, but they would definitely communicate that before charging anything. So I wouldn't worry about that. And given the expertise that they've been providing us, the fee ends up being pretty nominal anyways when it compares to the money and the headaches that they have been saving us on some recent projects and shipments. So, and as always, you're always welcome to reach out to procurement. All right, now to get into some best practices for international shipping that we want to communicate out to you guys. This will just be a quick overview of some best practices. And so it won't necessarily fit every situation, but it's definitely a good order of operations to start out with. We do want to highlight that the sooner you can get procurement or Baker involved in your project or your shipment, the smoother the process will likely go for you, and we might even be able to save you some money on tariffs and other shipping charges and fees along the way. So I also want to point out that this doesn't necessarily apply to purchases that are going through the RFQ or RFP process through procurement. So this would be considered for purchases that are less than 50,000, or if it is more than 50,000, it would if it qualifies for a sole source. All right, so we just want to highlight especially these first two steps of the process now that we've brought Baker on. They've been able to help us a lot at the beginning. So on Baker's webpage that I had showed previously, there's instructions and a link out to the IOR template, or the importer of record template. This is a form that you would send to the supplier that you're working with, and they would answer the questions, provide information, quotes, and any other documentation or information that would be pertinent to a shipment. And then you or that supplier would be able to provide that document over to Baker, our customs broker, so that they could consult and provide recommendations for pricing, potential duty exemptions for that item, some good courier options and shipping terms that you might want to use, and possibly other requirements that would pertain specifically to that shipment. And then after working with Baker and the supplier to kind of work out all the details, you could then go forward with the more standard process of creating the requisition and the PO, and then continuing to monitor communications until that shipment reaches you. Baker has been really great about communicating, staying in contact with our suppliers along the way, as well as the folks making the orders. So again, just want to reiterate, bringing in Baker and procurement as soon as possible to help the process go more smoothly. And then you'll always want to engage procurement for shipments that are over 10,000, but if you find your shipment of value, you may just want to include us or Baker to make sure that that item gets where it needs to go. So thanks for this. I'm going to hand it over to Bennett now to go more in depth on some other resources.
Thanks, Jillian. And thank you all for listening to us today. The implementation of tariffs has been a bit of a shock to the free trade system, but the Florence Agreement, although it is a little bit niche, it is very valuable to think about duty mitigation in that way. The Florence Agreement, it's also known as the Agreement for the Importation of Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Materials, is a treaty whereby the United States agrees not to impose customs duties on certain educational, scientific, and cultural materials. They use a special HTS code to identify when they make that decision. There are some requirements, and like I said, this is a sort of a niche thing. Some of you might be familiar with this previous tariffs, but it's a lot more common now. The way to think about this might be similar to how you would think about a sole source justification form. The difference here would be that there's no U.S. equivalent. So it would be a specific use of the item that you're buying. You wouldn't be not allowed to make any money off of what you're buying. There's a commitment to purchase involved. You have to spend quite a bit of time detailing the documentation, the process that you followed. Sort of a little bit more of an intense version of the SSJ with a domestic element. Pretty valuable to think through how you could mitigate duty. Obviously, we're all trying to find ways to save money, and this is a really great way to do it. It does take a little bit of extra time and planning. Typically, you would want to start this thought process before engaging the suppliers directly. You'd want to think through these ideas as early as possible, if that's available to you. The changes to tariff to the free trade system have required some advancements in how we think about shipping terms. Domestic shipping terms don't really have a one-to-one equivalent with international shipping terms. They typically describe those as Incoterms. The most common of those two would be delivered at place and delivered duty paid. We can discuss those on the next slide. We see those most often. Each decision there, delivered duty paid or delivered at place, would be sort of situational. There isn't a wrong answer. It just depends on the circumstances. Delivered at place, the university would be the importer of record, so you would have the opportunity to apply for the duty mitigation through the Florence Agreement. Delivered duty paid, the supplier is the importer of record, so there isn't really any options there. It is pretty important to communicate at the very beginning of the process on what you would prefer or what option is better. Suppliers are typically willing to make an adjustment at the beginning of the quote solicitation process as opposed to later on when they believe that the sale has been made. I have a hard time getting them to adjust after the fact once I receive the what they understand to be a sale that's already been made. So that is important to keep in mind. The importer of record pays the duty directly to CBP. So there's a pretty beneficial version of the accounting practices that happen there. If you have a record of exactly what you've paid, the audit will go better, hypothetically. If you decide that you'd like to utilize a delivered duty paid, that charge would be reflected as a surcharge on your quote. If the supplier decides to make a little bit of extra profit and doesn't show you the math, there's some opportunity for the audit to have some extra questions involved there. So please keep that in mind. We're always looking to save you some money, so if we can, just get a hold of us whenever possible. On the next slide here, we've provided you some additional information, some links, just some background if you want to look into this yourselves. Some of that is can be a little bit dense. We're happy to help you however you want, but thinking about this on your own and then presenting some ideas to Baker is really the best way to save yourself some money. In the procurement process, I think you've all heard, get a hold of procurement as soon as possible. I'll say that again here. This is even a more important time to utilize the experts. Baker is a great partner in this, and they are, in my opinion, much better than what we had before. So there are resources available here to help you. If some of this stuff is a little bit new, it certainly is nuanced. I spend a lot of time talking about it, and I can pretty much detect when folks are annoyed and their eyes start to glaze over. So if you spend time on your own, getting a handle on this, and then you come to procurement or you go to Baker, we can really, really help you save money. There's a lot of ways to look at this problem, and we're happy to do that for you. If we had any questions, we'd be happy to answer them. Really, the last thing I would say is please remember that it is much harder to adjust these terms or the situation, the purchase circumstances later on in the purchase process. Please remember to either ask for the correct Incoterm or the Incoterm that you'd want in the beginning, or ask for an adjustment at the beginning. That's really the key to it. Early and often, maximize your benefits there.
Okay, thank you, Bennett and Jillian. Okay, so I have one more superpower to share with you today, and this is one of my favorites. It is curious questions. So essentially, curious questions are open-ended, non-judgmental questions. Open-ended meaning you can't just answer with a simple yes or no. They might start with what, how, or why. And here's some examples. What options are you considering? How do you feel about what happened? And one of my favorites that doesn't start with the what, how, or why, tell me more about that. So tips for embracing this superpower. Try using open-ended questions in your personal, your professional life. I really like peppering these everywhere. It's, for example, it's the difference of saying, "Did your day go well?" to saying, "How was your day?" And it just gives a person the ability to answer in a more nuanced way. Rather, things are often not one way or another. They have multiple faces to them. So some more examples here. What do you think about, or how might we? Basically, it's just encouraging dialogue. When you're employing curious questions, avoid a yes or no construction. Of course, many times yes or no will be the way that you want to go, but when you're using this strategy, try to keep it open. And then be sure and allow for silence to let people think before answering. Answering a question like this, people might want some time to formulate their response. I know that silence can be difficult for some people. So, a couple things that you can try doing is counting in your head or singing a song in your head while you give that person space to respond. If you see that they're struggling, then you could offer another gentle prompt or question to help them, another different open-ended question. And then when they do respond, listen deeply to that response so that you can be sure to understand their experience and the underlying meaning. When we think about communication, we think about obviously the part that is spoken or written, but we all know that communication happens on other levels too, in our body language and also in what we think of as like reading between the lines, what's said but isn't said. So by listening deeply, we will pick up on those kinds of things, and then we can explore them further with follow-up questions. You just base specifically on what you're picking up on, or you can prompt with things like the examples here. Can you say more about that, or what else? So your challenge for this one is to try a curious question. In an upcoming conversation that you have. There are some examples here, and you can definitely find more examples online. The what if construction examples here are also a really interesting strategy, because what if allows us to think about the future, a conditional that hasn't happened yet. So what if we tried this? What if we succeeded, or what if we failed? Thinking about things in these different ways kind of opens it up to allow us to imagine scenarios that we just, outside of what we might be thinking about. And so I'll leave one kind of parting thought to sum up this superpower uh, trio, is just to remember that all of us are superheroes and have the superpowers that we have gathered along the way in our personal and professional roles. And so I hope that you're able to take some of these tips and use them in your everyday worlds. And remember to share your superpowers with your colleagues and others, and vice versa. And with that, I will turn it over to Debbie Talley for a sponsored programs update.
Great. Thanks, Jess. And hello, everyone. I have some updates to share with you from Spencer Programs. First off, I know you've all seen this before, but we just want to say thank you for all of your help in getting our reports done during our busy season, which ended last December. If you can go to the next slide, I can just share a couple updates here. So we were able to complete 99% of the reports that were due before we headed out for the season days. And we really owe a lot of gratitude to all of you. So thank you for your help and support getting the reports back to our staff in the reporting area. And as you can see here, the numbers were huge. So we completed, with your help, almost 1,800 reports. And that's a huge number for a very short period of time, which includes the Thanksgiving holiday, as well as leaving early in December for the season days. So thank you so much for all your help with that. And as you can tell, we're always moving right along onto the next thing. So we're heading into spring, and actually it's thundering in Ann Arbor today. Wherever you might be, I don't know if you're getting rain or not, but we're having thunder and rain. So it really is spring, I guess. But we're going to be now focusing on our closeouts. So going on to what we are working on currently, we have about 1,400 closeouts to do. So as you all know, once we get those reports submitted to the sponsors, then we need to close out those projects. That includes moving charges off that don't belong on that particular project, making sure that any appointments that might have lingered get moved off, and we're able to close out the projects and inactivate them so that no more charges hit. As you can see here, it's a pretty significant number, but with your help, I'm confident that we can get as many of those as possible wrapped up before we start working on reports again. Which, as you know, reports are due every single month. So it's not like we're stopping. It's just that we have a chance to take a breath and work on closeouts. So the next thing I just wanted to share is we were able to finalize our UG audit, so the single audit for fiscal year 25. That was completed, and there were no findings. And just a reminder, last year's audit did not include research and development. So it's really exciting that there were no findings, but the work that the auditors focused on was actually on financial aid. So starting next month, the auditors are going to be back, and they will start working on the FY26 audit. They do some work early on, and then they come back in the summer and into fall. But it will include research and development. So I'm at the point where they have selected their projects to look at. We'll be working with you to get that information. So moving on, we also have some changes that are coming our way. So when we received our new indirect cost negotiation, which didn't change the rates, but when that goes into effect, which is actually July 1st of this year, there will be an increase to the thresholds. For equipment, that's moving from $5,000 to $10,000. And for subcontracts, the modified total direct cost, that's moving from $25,000 to $50,000. So hopefully, as you are preparing proposals, you're keeping that in mind if there's a possibility that will be awarded beginning after July 1st. For ongoing projects that we have right now, those thresholds won't be changing. So this is only for new awards beginning July 1st. I'm imagining that there will be lots of questions as this rolls out, but we'll be communicating more, and our customer service team will be able to help you with any questions you might have. All right, and the last item that I wanted to share before I chat about our personnel update is a reminder. So expense reporting, it's really important that expense reports are submitted timely. Some of you may have noticed that when those are not submitted timely, if they go past the due dates, that then becomes additional pay. They're no longer really reimbursing us for expenses. We're being paid additionally. So additional pay may not be allowable on a sponsored project, So it's really important that expense reports get submitted timely so that those expenses are truly allowable expenses on the project. And then the last thing I wanted to share was that Karen Schwartz has returned to sponsor programs this week, and we're excited to have Karen back. She left us for a little while to work on campus and work outside of the university, but she's back and she'll be working on reports. So we're really happy to have her back, and I imagine that you might see her name on some of the reports that start coming your way. And with that, I think that's everything I had. It looks like maybe there's a question. Will property also recognize the change? Yes. Yep. More information to come about all of the changes with the uniform guidance, and that should answer that question as well. So I think we're good. I'm going to now turn it over to Andrea for her update from ORSP.
You're mute.
Sorry, I was
It's okay.
I was talking, I swear. I just said thanks, Debbie. Hi, everyone. So if we could move on to the next slide. So we got actually quite a number of sponsor updates for you, which I guess is not surprising given the pattern of the last year with sponsored updates. So we can go ahead and dive right in. A few updates on the Common Form. So we've been talking about this for a couple of years, right? Science CV rollout and agencies slowly implementing their requirements for Science CV. NIH had announced late last year that they were going to require the use of the Common Forms by January 25th, 2026. But however, there was a FAQ posted in, well, I think it was posted around the 25th actually, by NIH, letting us know that they're actually going to give us an extension on that requirement. And that was followed in early February with the NOT referenced here, letting us know that they're extending the deadline to May. NIH has explained that there have been some hiccups with the implementation in terms of technical errors in the system. They identified specifically that the way that the sign-ins were integrated in Science CV with ERA Commons login, as well as login.gov, was creating duplicate accounts for many users, and that was creating a lot of problems on the back end because folks would create their BioSketch in one login and then use the other method of logging in and create a new account and have none of the materials they had created available there and couldn't figure out what the issues were. So they have since corrected that, but they are going through the backlog and eliminating or joining all of those duplicate accounts with the tickets that had been submitted prior to fixing that hiccup. So that's one of the reasons that they're giving this grace period. During this time, you will see that if there are what would normally be considered errors in terms of using the Common Forms on your application, those will be listed as warnings, and NIH is not going to reject applications on that basis, but they will show up as warnings when you're working to submit your application. So be aware of that. Subsequent guidance notice is anticipated to come out this spring, announcing when it will escalate to an error. And then once that goes into place, obviously they would begin rejecting if there are non-compliant BioSketches and other support, current and pending other support forms. We also wanted to just highlight for you that on December 3rd, Department of Energy did implement the mandate to use Science CV for BioSketches and current and pending or other support. So be aware of that if you're submitting a DOE application that is required. Next slide. NIH Common Forms, some general tips. So just a few things that we have learned over the last month or so as folks have started to try and use these forms with NIH applications. The current and pending other support Common Form documents have to be created, or if they are being created in Science CV, they have to be certified by the owner of the information and uploaded in PDF format generated by Science CV. But again, there is a delay on that mandate. You should not flatten the PDF once certified and downloaded from Science CV. Updated just-in-time guidance around this. Make sure to verify your ORCID to ERA links now in order to avoid delays when the mandate goes into effect. NIH has revised the just-in-time module and requires the upload of individual current and pending other support documents for each investigator. This is important because historically our business process has been to ask you to combine all of these documents when you're uploading them to ERPM. That is now creating additional work for both you and us because you are spending the time to combine all of these and we are then uncombining them so that we can get them uploaded. So we would ask that you no longer combine all of these documents into one PDF and rather just upload the individual documents. It will save both you and us work. That was a business process that worked in the old environment and does not work so well any longer. Make sure that you rename the current and pending other support file instead of resaving it to avoid triggering a just-in-time error. ORSP recommends including the Commons ID in the file name. And when requesting ORSP action, please upload each current and pending other support document as a separate PDF file. As I mentioned, historically, we've asked folks to combine everything into one. We do not want that anymore because we're just going to uncombine it and that makes work for all of us. That's unnecessary. Thank you. NIH Common Forms resources. So just some links here for you all to reference some guidance about each of the different forms and how to use them. There's a video about how to create your NIH BioSketch in Science CV and instructions from NIH as well as at their FAQ. So definitely good resources to check out if you have questions. Next slide. NIH PF5 applications. So this is related to the new NIH mandate that they do not want folks issuing international subawards, and instead they will be issuing direct awards to what would formerly have been subawards with international partners. Under this new model that NIH is putting out, they are requiring the use of PF5 application types in order to submit these applications where historically you would have submitted with an international subaward on your proposal. This is the new mechanism to use when you have international collaborators. Applications must use the multi-component structure and be submitted in ASSIST. So if you are in this situation where you normally would have submitted with an international sub, this is now the process that you'll need to use, and you need to make sure you use that multi-component structure. Otherwise, you have the potential to have your application rejected for non-compliance with these requirements. You need to include at a minimum an overall component, a research project component, and an international project component for each funded foreign collaborator institution. The first deadline that we are aware of at this point for a PF5 application is May 25th. NIH is still working out a lot of the details on this, so there will be more to come as we know more. Hopefully well before that deadline. The foreign entity in these situations is required to submit via the UF5 As of yet, and I haven't checked in the last 2 days, but as of 2/17, there were no funding opportunities out under the UF5 mechanism. So we would expect to see that in the future, particularly if the first deadline of the PF5 is 5/25. All of these applications are now being reviewed by the relevant National Advisory Council or board. And the application must include a letter from each foreign organization's authorized official representative or authorized organizational representative, acknowledging that they will fill the role of a recipient organization for the disaggregated award. Next slide, thank you. So there are also some updates from NSF on the PAPG. NSF has updated the PAPG through NSF 26200, and some of the updates we just want to highlight to you, although I very strongly recommend you go out and look at NSF's summary of all of the updates and read through the revised PAPG if you're working with NSF. But some we wanted to highlight. There's added data sharing requirements to share all data supporting NSF-funded publications at the time of publications, and any exceptions must be described and justified. There's an increased cap for planning on rapid and eager proposals. They've added the definition of direct recipient of NSF funding in the context of requirements to report foreign financial support of $50,000 or more based on the entity receiving NSF awards through its own UEI. Updated requirements for annual and final inventory reports, and added text defining research misconduct, whether committed by an individual directly or through the use of assistance of other persons, entities, tools, including AI tools. There's more information that you can reference. Back in the December 2025 wrap, we talked about this and more. Next slide. So Department of Energy transparency of foreign connection forms, and I know David's up after me, so he's probably going to go into more detail on some of these things, but the Department of Energy is now requiring a transparency of foreign connection disclosure and certification form in many funding opportunity announcements. When you are completing the forms, please only answer the items marked with an asterisk. And for question 7, IP and licensing, which hopefully that form is static, I'm betting it's not. So that number might not be the right reference point if it gets updated. But ORSP will contact Innovation Partnerships to obtain the required list of entities that receive technology or intellectual property. Once ORSP obtains the list, the PAF will be returned for a required change to have the project team complete 7B as it pertains to the specific proposal and upload the ORSP signed form and the list of entities to the final proposal package. So again, if the form question numbers change, just bear in mind it's the IP and licensing question. Next slide. AFOSR spending rates and no cost extensions. So ORSP recently had a meeting with AFOSR at their request. And this is more just advisory. AFOSR wanted to learn more about what might be hindering spending rates on sponsored projects or hindering the ability to get them started. And wanted to discuss with different institutions. So they've actually been traveling around the country talking to universities all over about this issue. They met with faculty and research administrators, both from the unit and from some of the central offices, to talk, what are the business processes? What are the barriers? But this is something that AFOSR is very interested in, particularly as it pertains to basic research, because they're wanting to ensure that the projects get completed while the funding is still available, because they do have a hard cutoff, and no cost extensions are going to become rarer and rarer. So it is interesting that they're doing a large project to look at this, and they did visit U of M and talk to a few folks here at the university to learn more about what some of those barriers to getting the research started might be. Next slide. DoD final rule for cybersecurity maturity model certification. I'm also hoping maybe David will talk about this a little bit too, but effective November 10th, the Department of Defense issued their final rule for CMMC. The rule mandates specific IT security requirements, physical and personnel security controls, and requirements on DoD contractor IT systems. This is specific to DoD contracts, and they name specific CMMC level requirements within the contract itself. We're required to make sure that we can actually meet those requirements before we sign the contract with DoD. So there is a lot of work that has to be done upfront when those contracts come in, or even before then at proposal stage, to make sure that we can actually comply with the applicable CMMC level before we agree to do the work. Institutions have to certify at the time of the agreement and over the life of the project that they remain compliant with the relevant CMMC level requirements. And enforcement of this rule introduces False Claims Act implications for noncompliance. So for those who are not familiar with False Claims Act, it's actually a very old Civil War era law about defrauding the government. That has evolved over time to sort of expand its applicability, but it involves the repayment in triplicate of expenses or of charges to the federal government for anything that they deem violated the False Claims Act. So it's incredibly expensive if an institution is non-compliant with anything that falls under that statute. So just important background on how that is being enforced. Next slide. NIH has also released some updated application policies in the referenced NOT here. They will no longer request or accept letters of intent as part of the application process, and they will no longer require applicants requesting $500,000 or more in direct costs in any one budget period to contact the funding institute before application submission, or include a cover letter identifying the program official contacted. This is a part of NIH's effort to reduce administrative burden in some of their processes. So that's great to see. Next slide. And on the home front. So we have made it through all of those sponsor updates. Yay. ORSP has a new address. So for those who don't know or haven't seen in one of the recent reps, we have moved. And I say that in air quotes because we haven't actually moved yet. We've just moved out of WOTO. So for those who don't know, WOTO is going away. Wolverine Tower is being torn down. I don't think it's been torn down quite yet, but it's definitely being torn down. And so all the various offices that were housed in that building have been assigned to new spaces. ORSP has been assigned to move to Victor's Way, but there is construction underway to update that space. So we will not physically be there for quite a while, but all of our mail goes there, and we do have folks going in to pick it up to make sure that everything gets processed timely. So that is our new address. It's what is to be used in applications as the official address. Next slide. We just wanted to share some contract tips and tricks. We know that this is an area where folks are trying to get things through ever faster, especially as there's renewed focus on non-federal funding sources to support various research programs. So a few tips for you on how to expedite your contract. You can, first off, you can check the status of your contract in Ironclad. There is limited access to that system, so the PI and the primary research administrator from ERPM assigned to a given record will have access to the Ironclad record once it's launched, and that access is given through an automated integration with ERPM. You can review the activity feed to understand everything that's been going on with your contract up to the minute. That is a live activity feed, and everything that we do is done through that system. So it is recorded automatically as actions happen. It also now has a new AI summarize feature of the activity feed. So if you want a quick at-a-glance update of what's been going on, there is this new feature in the system itself at the top of the activity feed that you can actually leverage to summarize what has gone on recently in the activity feed. Bear in mind it's AI generated, so check your source. Sometimes it might misinterpret things, but it is a nice feature for a quick at a glance update. Coming soon, we will have some new resources being shared out about how to navigate Ironclad. Also coming soon, which Carolyn will mention in her slides a little bit later on, we are going to be expanding access to Ironclad to include approvers from the ERPM approvers group. And that'll be in the March release of ERPM updates. We also have a non-disclosure template out on our website. This is a great way to accelerate getting your NDA done by using the pre-approved U of M non-disclosure template. If it's done without changes, that is the absolute fastest way to get an NDA in place at University of Michigan. Just download the latest template from our website linked here, send directly to the sponsor. If they can accept the terms as is, please note that when you route it to ORSP. We do review those UFAs when they come in to look for notes like that, and that will help us expedite that and move it to the top of the list because it will be a simple route for signature. Next slide. This is where I get to hand it over to Jess.
Thank you, Andrea. Okay, I'm back for a few slides to talk about the new RSP website coming this spring. So here's a preview screenshot of the current website and the new website. And I'll talk a little bit about the specifics and features, but first I wanted to just give the background of why we are switching, why we're updating the website. Part of the reason is because the current site is built on dated technology, and we essentially need to move it to a new, more modern and secure platform. And that's something that OVPR is doing with their other web properties as well. They're going through a phased process of making this transition. So within that, there's a really fantastic opportunity for us to also modernize the front end of the website and improve the navigation and your experience of using the site. And so one of the things I'll flag here is that you'll also see that we have a new lifecycle graphic to come. So as part of this project, ORSP is working with OVPR and others on also redesigning the project lifecycle graphic and modernizing that as well. So next slide. I just want to share the timeline and some of the steps that we've been going through. So this process started last fall, really taking an in-depth look at what exists on the website, how people are interacting with it, and imagining, what the future could be. This work is supported by a contractor, Boxcar, that is working with the web design and development aspects of it. And we are working within a framework. Many of the decisions have already been made in terms of the framework and the system that we're using. We're moving to a WordPress site, but there are many decisions that we can make in terms of the look and feel, the navigation that we've been going through with Boxcar. And that process is also informed by benchmarking, looking at other sites, what is working well and what isn't, and focus groups, several in this meeting have participated in the focus groups, and that information has been immensely helpful. We also interviewed individuals to take all of that into figuring out how we could really improve the site. And so now we're in the really doing the work part, working on the content prep, working through the designs on the site. They'll start building the site, and we're aiming for a soft launch in April of 2026. So this April. And the soft launch will essentially give us an opportunity to test drive it and QC it before we take it live, and that will be in May. And on the next slide, I just wanted to feature talk about a few of the new features in the site and what you can expect. So as I mentioned, easier to navigate pages and site overall. We're really aiming for fewer, longer pages with navigation built into the page so that you can find what you're looking for easily. So for example, each page will have a mini table of contents on it so you can see what's everything that's on that page. They'll also have a left-hand navigation bar, so you'll be able to see everything that's within that section. The search for the site overall will be better because the way that the site is designed will help that functionality, so it will be easier to find things. We want to, of course, minimize the disruption that the switchover will cause because it will be like a light switch, old site onto the new site. So we want to minimize that disruption. And one of the ways we'll do that is by making sure that the old pages are redirected. So if you have bookmarks to certain pages, it will basically redirect to the new site. And then, when you're able, you can go set up new bookmarks. That will be true for the majority of the pages, but we will have some kind of ancillary resources that we will definitely redirect them to a place on the site, but it might not be a one-to-one. And that's where that search will really help out. And we will also be available to answer questions if you're having trouble finding something that you're looking for. And we'll provide more communications about that as we get closer. So a few of the features of the new site, here are some screenshots of the expandable menu. So the site will still be organized largely on the project lifecycle graphic by the different phases in the life cycle. And so here you can see what this expandable menu will look like. So you'll be able to see within the section what's all of the information that's inside of here. We'll also have a filterable training section. We've been working closely with Navigate and RAC to imagine what this training tool could look like, where people could go and be able to search for training by the topic or in the category or keyword search. So you can see what's coming up by the date or just what's available on demand in e-learning offerings on this page. And then you'll be able to click into it to access it. And the other thing that's not on here, I didn't have a screenshot of, but I wanted to mention is that we'll also have a new forms and template section, which is definitely something that was raised in the focus group feedback, that people really wanted a place where they could access all of the forms and templates in one spot, in addition to those being nested within their topical area. So that's another area that I'm excited about. And I think that's all I have. Thanks, Andrea.
Thanks, Jess. Okay, just 2 more slides, I promise, and then I'm going to turn it over to somebody else. So FY25 annual research report. We just wanted to highlight a few things from the OVPR annual research report here. We had a new record in research expenditures last year, hitting 2.16 billion, which is a 5.6% increase over the prior year. We had over 1,600 new research awards. So that's not all sponsored projects. That is limited specifically to research awards. 673 inventions and 31 new startups. So really exciting. A lot got done last year, even with all of the turmoil around terminations and regulation changes. It's really great to see this. Next slide. And we also just wanted to remind you there's only a couple days left for nominating someone for the Research Staff and Faculty Awards. You can use these QR codes to get to the nomination forms. They are due by February 20th, so actually that's tomorrow. So if you haven't started yet, I suggest doing it because it will take a little bit of legwork to get the nomination completed, but it is a really great honor. And if there's someone you want to recognize, this is a fabulous way to do it. So we would encourage you to take some time out of your day and take a look at this if there's someone you'd like to nominate. And with that, Chris, I don't know if or Jess, I don't know if there are any questions. I'm just looking at the Q&A.
Do have quite a few, we have 6 questions. Some of them might be rather quick. So the first one regarding the NIH BioSketch Science CV adoption, do all BioSketches in the same application need to use the same format, and that is either the old version or the common forms? And if that's not required, does ORSP have a preference?
Oh gosh, you guys come up with stuff I haven't even thought of. I honestly don't know if that would, so they're not giving errors. I would guess you could do either or. I just don't know how those are linked up in the system. So I hate to give you a for sure answer because I feel like I might answer that incorrectly. Do me a favor and shoot that question over to me by email, and I'll have somebody get back with an answer.
Fantastic. Next question. What is the reason for not flattening the Science CV files after downloading?
My understanding is it might create a problem with the system. So again, probably too technical for me, but I know that it creates a problem, so don't do it.
Do you want me to answer it,
Andrea? Oh, thank you, Carolyn. I'm so glad you're here.
The reason is that Science CV is embedding something when the investigator does the certification, with their name and date to certify that piece. And so systems are checking for it, specifically the ERA comments. You don't want to flatten it. And in fact, in eResearch, when you flatten documents, those documents are specifically excluded. So that's probably important to know as well.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, next question. Will the PF5 be required for an ongoing program? And then the example is supplemental funding for year 5 of a 5-year project.
I don't know that NIH has answered that question yet. I think we're going to have to wait for additional guidance from them, honestly. My understanding is the first phase of all of this was getting rid of international subs on existing awards. So I'm not certain how they're going to handle renewals like that at this time.
Okay.
Hopefully they'll have more soon.
Okay. Next question. In general, is there a best practice when submitting via Assist when that's required or when it requires materials from the PI? Are Assist uploads from U of N typically expected to be handled by the RA or ORSP?
I believe the RA is supposed to to upload everything into the system. We're doing the submission. So just like with any external sponsor system that doesn't connect to ERPM, you're typically creating the proposal in that system as the RA, and then we would be going in to validate that everything matches up and it's been uploaded and doing all of our normal review of the proposal in that system.
Okay. I believe this question relates to Ironclad, but it didn't specify. Are there any templates for other kinds of UFAs, or is it only the NDAs?
Right now, in terms of sending out templates, I believe we have the NDA out there and we have the visiting researcher agreement out there. I don't know if we have any other templates up on that page, but they're all on the same page together if you go out to our website. And generally, if folks use our template, it can get negotiated much faster.
Okay. Last question. At the time of the RPPR, if we don't have an updated other support, how should we address the malign certification requirement?
Well, in the RPPR.
Well, here's David. Maybe David can help with that one.
Yeah, I bet he can.
So
I think they have a form.
They have a giant air quotes form. if you go back to the notice where they first issued this, the expectation currently is that each senior key personnel on the project will upload basically a do-it-yourself form that includes specific language that's included in the notice that essentially just says, I am not a party to a malign foreign talent recruitment program, and then electronically sign it. So with the indication that NIH is currently exploring longer term system-based fixes for this.
Thanks, David. Don't
Yeah.
you guys have a form too that I saw you share with somebody not too long ago?
We do have a form when we're subbing to an institution that asks us to provide some sort of assurance. Our hope is not to go too far afield, but there's also been a lot of conversation like at FDP that if we could include this information in the clearinghouse, like for instance, we have an institution-wide prohibition on malign foreign talent recruitment programs, and so if we could solve this problem a little bit more holistically, it would probably make a lot of people's lives easier.
Well, since I'm done with my slides and all the questions are through, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thanks, David.
All right. Thank you, Andrea. And I'm going to share my screen because I was tardy in turning in my homework. So Chris doesn't have it, but can someone give me a thumbs up?
Gotcha. You're good.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. All right. So I just have a few quick updates from the research security perspective that I wanted to share. So kind of speaking broadly, just to give folks a heads up, people may have lost sight of this or never been aware of this because it's been out there in the ether for quite a while now. But one of the requirements under National Security Presidential Memorandum number 33 or NSPM 33 is that federal research funding agencies have to implement requirements for covered institutions, which we are a covered institution. It's any institution that receives more than $50 million annually in federal R&D funding, that we have to implement a research security program. We've been waiting, frankly, for years now for the federal agencies to issue their specific requirements for covered institutions regarding these research security programs. But based on just this most recent FDP meeting that happened in January, it sounds like it may actually be on the near horizon. And it's from what we heard, NSF is going to be issuing one of their important notices, but they're kind of the messenger for a few agencies that have all joined together to do a combined, coordinated rollout of harmonized research security program requirements. Right now, the agencies that are involved in that are NIH, NSF, DOE, and DOD, DOW, whatever you want to call them. So we had hoped actually that important notice would already have been released by NSF. The word on the street is that it's just awaiting final approval from OSTP, the Office of Science and Technology Policy. So we expect it any day. The reason I'm bringing this up at RAN is because once the clock starts ticking from the implementation of those agency requirements, institutions like U of M will have 1 year to be able to certify that we have a compliant research security program. We know just from the language in NSPM 33 that research security programs will have to include aspects related to cybersecurity, foreign travel security, research security training, and then export controls training as applicable. We don't know any more details than that because we're waiting for the agencies to tell us their requirements. The reason I'm mentioning it here is just to give everyone a heads up that depending on what's in those requirements, while we are hopeful that U of M's existing programs and processes around cybersecurity, travel security, research security training, and export control training will meet whatever is in those requirements, we just don't know yet. So there may be more changes coming on the horizon. We'll see. All right, then jumping into just a handful of agency-specific updates. At the recent FDP meeting, NIH also just clarified that while everything that Andrea mentioned a few minutes ago about the PF5, UF5 process for new, what used to be foreign subawards and are now their own standalone awards, NIH clarified that they will still accept requests for non-financial foreign components. And if you're not familiar with NIH's definition of a foreign component, in essence, it's any instance where a significant scientific element of the NIH-funded project is happening outside of the United States, regardless of whether NIH funds are being expended. So the money doesn't really matter for there to be a foreign component. It's where the actual work is happening. And so you can, I'm sure, imagine there are cases where there would legitimately be a foreign component on a project that would not actually be a sub-award. And so NIH clarified that in those cases, they will be still accepting requests for foreign components for non-financial purposes. Then for the Department of War/Defense, there was recently a directive that came out requiring that all of the components, different kind of component in this case, now we're talking about Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, that they need to complete annual spot checks related to research security. The directive requires that they complete those spot checks on all awards that have research security risk mitigation measures in place, and at least 25% of Department of Defense fundamental research awards in general. Mentioning this only because while some folks from DoD have said that they don't anticipate there being much impact on recipient institutions or the project teams that are working on those awards, I'll believe that when I see it. And so if you are a research administrator on a project that has a research security risk mitigation plan in place, or frankly, if you just have DoD research, you may be contacted sometime in the future when DoD is conducting one of these spot checks. All right. Moving on to USDA. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this just because we overall have a very small portfolio of USDA research, but just be aware if you do work on USDA research, if you haven't already heard, USDA released a new set of general terms and conditions on December 31st that includes a variety of somewhat murky and potentially troubling terms and conditions. In particular, the ones that I wanted to point out here are that it includes a broader, potentially broader definition of covered individuals. For the other agencies, we've typically seen covered individuals defined as either senior key personnel or their equivalent. It's not quite clear that USDA is following suit in that regard. Also, in their new TNCs, they have issued a 10-year retroactive prohibition on any participants in malign foreign talent recruitment programs, which is somewhat problematic only because we only all just learned about these about, I don't know, 6 years ago or so. And so we don't have that information available. And also they have issued a broader requirement for research security training. Again, the other agencies have typically indicated that research security training is required for covered individuals, again, generally equating to senior key personnel or their equivalents. USDA so far has said that it is their intention is for research security training to be required for all individuals working on the award, meaning if you have a lab staff member who happens to be paid off of the grant, even if they are not listed on the PAP or the award, they would technically be subject to USDA's research security training requirement. Bottom line is USDA has gotten feedback from a variety of different sources about the confusion that these terms and conditions have caused. So stay tuned. Hopefully we will get some possibly some good news or at least some clarification on their expectations. And then last agency specific update, word on the street, again, just based on a verbal comment at the recent FDP meeting is that NASA will also be transitioning to Science CV for biosketches and current and pending other support. So if you are a NASA person, maybe you think that's good news. Hopefully you do. And then I just also included some links here for some additional resources. If you haven't checked out some of the information that's available on the NSF Secure Center, I would recommend it, including the weekly research security briefings that are published each week by the Secure Center, and then also a link to FDP's update on the status of federal research security requirements, which they keep updated over time. And with that, I believe I am turning things over to the wonderful Carolyn Pappas.
Hey, David,
Thank you, David.
we did have a
Oh.
couple questions.
Okay.
The first one is related to the spot check that you talked about. Do you
Yep.
know what that entails?
No. My guess is, again, this is total speculation. My guess is that they are going for awards that have a mitigation plan in place. My guess is they're going to basically check to see if whatever the open source information was that led DoD to have concern and implement that that risk mitigation plan. They're going to see if there's any new or updated information related to those concerns. And I would expect kind of along the same lines for the just sort of the general population of DoD awards. I would wager that they're going to basically do their standard open source review of those awards as if they were going through a risk mitigation review to see what they turn out. But
Okay.
that, again, speculation.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks. That's what we have.
Okay.
Okay, we're switching back to the slide deck. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to give an ITS update. Next slide, please. So I have one slide on e-research proposal management, our upcoming update, and then the rest of it is on the e-research replacement project. So as Andrea alluded to, we have a release coming up. It is scheduled for March 23rd, and it is mostly a bug fix release. We had a number of things queued up when we were doing our upgrade last fall, so we're going to take care of those. And then we've also added two things, the big one being the ironclad provisioning change. So again, approvers who are on departments in ERPM will now get global access to records in ironclad. So that means you no longer have to go on to an individual record and mention that person's name. They will just have access. And then the same thing, we will deprovision them. So the one thing that we ask is that department approvers and unit liaisons, that you keep an eye on those lists and you make sure that they are updated. So we're giving access to people in your department that you want us to give access to. And then the other thing is we are updating the new ORSP mailing address on the SF424 forms. Again, those fields are editable, so you're welcome to edit them yourselves today, but we will map them in come March 23rd. And then we are expecting another SF424 update from our vendor. They are going to release it in mid-March. We will test internally and then hope to release it probably sometime in early to mid-April. In addition to some new version of existing forms, they are making one additional change to the NIH validations around the NIH Science CV forms. So we will definitely have those in place before NIH turns on that requirement again. So the rest of the slides are really to update you on where we are with the e-research replacement recommendation project. This is the slide that appears in all of my slide decks. As a reminder, we have an end of life of 2031. This is vendor initiated. And so what we're using today with the 4 e-research modules will change. We will not be using those in 2031. The change is going to start much before 2031. It may start as early, at least the planning phase, as this coming fall. And I want to emphasize here that this is not just a system change. This is a system and business process change. And as we get further into this project, we will definitely have discussions around that. Next slide, please. So this is just a timeline that we're using, so you can have a visual check on where we are. We just finished a planning project. As of the 28th of January, the RFP, request for proposal, was sent out by procurement, and we are now waiting on vendors to respond to that. They have 6 weeks to respond, and then we will go ahead and make the selection for the next phase of vendor demos. Next slide, please. So to recap, we spent about 2 years in a planning phase to make sure we were able to collect the right requirements and document them. Gave us time to explore who was out on this software market in research administration systems. We did a lot of collaboration. We did community groups, advisory groups, survey feedback. We talked to a lot of our peer institutions. Last summer, we did a request for information from the different vendors. And we also have started to set up the governance. And so we have a project steering committee of members who are ready to go with us into this next phase. Next slide, please. So the next phase is the RFP phase. That is where we will be evaluating some of the vendors, both verbally on their responses and then through vendor demos. We will select some partners eventually, and the contracts will be negotiated. That is the goal for 2026. I want to point out the right-hand column, though. We are starting to collect and provide opportunities for campus input and feedback. So we're looking for, and we're reaching out through various channels to gauge interest on vendor demo recordings, participating in user focus groups when we narrow down the list of vendors, and then also to fill out a survey to give us your feedback and impression of attending either one of those groups. I also want to point out, now that we are in an RFP phase, we have to be very careful about who we communicate with. So we have a reminder on here that if you are involved in any of these, we cannot communicate any specifics to any vendors during this phase, which will last a number of months during this year. So rough what's coming up in the next few months. We are expecting the vendor presentations to start towards the end of April and go into May. That will be followed by a proof of concept. So this is more of a sandbox environment with some of those vendors to explore the products on a deeper level, to have focus groups, and then to help us provide feedback to inform a decision. We are expecting the fall, if all goes well, that we would have final selections. There will then be a contract negotiation period, and then we would engage that new vendor or vendors for implementation planning that fall, with project kickoff starting as early as 2027. And I also want to emphasize here that this is not everyone starting on 2027. We are anticipating that we would do some sort of staggered implementation of module by module. So happy to take questions today, but I want to point out different ways you can get in touch with us. So we have an eResearch replacement project website that has timeline, has FAQs, and we do keep it up to date. We also have an email, which is in here, and we do monitor it and respond back. And then at any point in time, if you want to give us some feedback, we do have a Google form that you can fill out. And again, that also goes to the project team. Thank you.
All right, Carolyn, we did have at least one question, maybe another one. I don't know if you have the answer to, but the first one is on the award side. Should the primary post-award RA automatically have access to Ironclad for that record? They're finding that they're not having that access.
So yes, they are added to it. However, this one is a little bit complicated because Once you get access, you only get access to that record when that record is completed. Your access likely falls off. So it literally could be you have it one day and then the next day you don't. And so if you have questions, we're also, we're happy to try to, if you do a help desk ticket, we're happy to try to query and see if you should have access to a specific record. But it works differently than the rest of ERPM, and it works differently than the approvers in that it is record by record.
Okay. And then there was another question. I think this kind of touched a little bit on your system updates, but for the March NIH deadlines, are folks expected to update the ORSP address in grants.gov, or I guess how does that happen? Should it happen? That kind of thing.
My understanding from talking with Karen at ORSP is that you are welcome to do the update. It is, it is not required. They typically are using email right now. So if you're a person that wants to go in and do the update, you can certainly change the address from Wolverine Tower to the new one. But after the 23rd, that's when when you use the copy map, that's when we will automatically map it in.
Okay, and then we just had one come in. How long to get Ironclad access to a record when the primary post award person is updated?
We run those a couple times a day. I would say probably a day to be safe. We do we do something in the morning, and then I think we do it at the end of the day. So it could be up to a day, Carrie. And again, if you're not seeing that person added, please just submit a help desk ticket, and we're happy to see if we can investigate what's going on.
And there's one more that just came in. I don't know if this pertains to you, or maybe we can put it over to ORSP, but how should units handle when Ironclad doesn't work for our sponsors?
Yeah, I think I'm going to ask Andrea to answer that one.
Okay.
I would need to know more about what it means doesn't work for your sponsors. Are we talking about for e-signature, or are we talking about something different?
Okay, I didn't.
E-signature. All right. So there is a process in ORSP if the sponsor lets us know that they don't want to use, it's actually not Ironclad that does the e-signature, it's Adobe Sign. Adobe Sign is integrated into Ironclad, and that is the electronic signature system that routes the agreement for signatures both internally and externally. But if they let us know they don't want to use Adobe Sign, there's a couple of different options, and the contract officer or AMO working on your record can advise the sponsor of those. One is simply to email it back to us, and we'll upload it to the record and complete the Adobe Sign envelope. The other is that they can actually download it from Adobe Sign and go route it however they would like to on their side, and they can upload it right back into that envelope in Adobe Sign and send it back over to us. So they can definitely work with the contract officer or AMO to work out what best works for them.
All right. Chris, am I turning it over to you?
Okay. Yeah. All right. Thanks, Carolyn.
Thank you.
Okay, so just a few RAC updates before we wrap up our time today. So I did want to let you all know, you've hopefully seen the communications about the RA by MI conference. We have over this slide, didn't get a chance to change it today, but I think we are now over 450 folks who have registered. I will drop a link to the registration form if you haven't done so already into the chat. Let me do that right now. I did want to let you know that it's a good problem that we have, but we are almost at capacity in terms of the rooms that we have available. So if you have not registered, please do so soon. That will kind of help us make sure that we get rooms that will accommodate everyone who would like to attend. And I will also say, as noted on the bottom here, we do have a no-show fee that will be charged if you don't cancel by April 20th. You can certainly feel free to cancel before that time. So if that applies to your situation, please let us know. Our keynote speaker speaker is going to be Dr. Brittany Alforter-Kane from the Research Universities for Michigan. So we're very excited to have Brittany there. I think there's going to be a lot of good information that will help to bridge and span the topics that we've now published on the conference website. I will say we are in the process of finalizing the schedule, so the time blocks for all of those presentations. And so that will be published as soon as that is available. That will happen before registration closes. So if that's something you're waiting for in order to make a decision, just know that that will be happening before March 20th. So again, register if you have not done so already, and we look forward to seeing everybody there. A few quick Navigate training updates. These were in the slides that were cycling before the meeting, but we do have some upcoming due dates for applications. The Advanced Budgeting Task-Based and Hourly Budgets course, those applications are going to be due on March 4th. Budgeting Basics for Sponsored Projects, those applications will be due on March 19th. And Uniform Guidance Cross Principles, those applications are due on Friday, April 24th. So again, we'll be sharing all the slides with you after. The links to apply for those courses are also in the slide deck. We have an upcoming webinar. It is Appointments, Calculations, and Effort, Oh My, and that is on March 25th. The registration for that needs to happen by the day before the webinar, but if you have a chance, you can go in there right now and register for that webinar. Past webinars, and I will also say over to the right-hand column, other videos that Navigate has produced and curated are available on the My Video channel. We also have e-learning modules and other job templates and job aids that are available for folks out on the Navigate website. This information, again, is all available to you after the meeting. And at this point, I wanted to turn it back over to Emma, who's going to close us out here in the last 4 minutes. Emma?
I can't undo my video. It won't. Okay, there. Hello, and thank you so much to Jess for kind of leading us through different superhero techniques we can use with our communication. That was incredibly helpful and always a good reminder. And to all of our presenters for sharing all relevant updates and new information that impacts all of us in some way. All we ask is if you could just take a quick moment to answer the poll if the questions or if the meeting today, if the information was relevant, highly not relevant, it helps us as we plan our future meetings. So we're happy to hear that most of the results came in as relevant and highly relevant. So that thank you again for those that responded. It really helps us as we look ahead to what topics we want to cover. On that note, just some reminders that our next RAN meeting will be on Thursday, May 19th. So hopefully it'll be much warmer and sunnier at that time. And again, thank you all for joining us. Thank you to our presenters and have a nice rest of your week. Thank you.